But I will say this, and I know we've spoken a lot about Navi throughout even this season and last season as well. Unless they make a roster change, I think they'll plummet. There's other teams out there who can overtake them.
No, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one. Here's why. Right, we are back. Sort of for the second season of 2026. It hasn't happened yet, even though as it is the nature of modern day CS, there's still a tournament going on in China, even though it looks like it's a bit of a mess, with teams that were at the majors, some of them, and teams who obviously need to earn VRS points for next season. But what we thought we'd do for this episode, because one thing in general I don't like about esports is, I do think people are way too short-sighted. They only basically talk about the last match, the next match, and, you know, like very, very in-the-moment things. And even though in the moment that's really cool to talk about, it just ages really poorly. It's not that interesting within even a few weeks. So I thought rather than just do Rostermania, all the usual things every other show's done, what would be a fun angle is we did this basically at the beginning of the year, which is when we were coming into the beginning of the year, we sort of picked the big teams and the big names, and we did kind of like our trajectory. So famously, if people don't remember, he was actually right. Pimp did have Furia as being as good, but people will forget this detail. He never said they'd be bad. He actually still said they had the potential to win tournaments. He just said they wouldn't win any. By the way, I think you nailed that one, mate. Didn't you just get both conditions there? They were good. They were still vaguely relevant. They just didn't win any tournaments. Like it's actually sort of appropriate. So we're going to try and do something similar for the second season of 2026. Not least because I do think, to me, I don't know how you feel on this, so maybe here's how I'll start the conversation. I actually, the more over the years, I've actually come more to Yanko's position, right? Which is, if everyone knows, when you do a live event, it's very famous. They ask analysts to make predictions about matches and overall things, right? And if people don't know, he's not trolling. Yanko is the person who has never given a flying fuck about winning like the prediction competition. In fact, he'll even tell you if it's a match where it's like Nico on literally any team against anyone. He did it when they were on mouse spots, mate, when they weren't even good. He'd just say, look, I'm a friend of Nico's, so I'm going to still analyse the game the same way, but I'm just going to predict Nico to win because he gives a fuck about predictions, right? I do think in general people do make the mistake of thinking they're like, we're not pretending we're psychic or that somehow we know better than the players. What we're actually trying to do is analysis. We're trying to take in all the strains of what we've seen and then do a little bit of sort of like, you know, well, let's see if that is heading down here and then maybe this player is going to be a bit better. And then at the end, we come up with something. So I actually think it's more interesting sometimes for me, these episodes, because what I want to know is sometimes I'm off. Sometimes actually I think a team, for example, I actually think Navi performed better than I expected this last season. I did sort of think they'd be stuck, you know, behind the big dogs and never winning the trophies, etc. Maybe I thought Furia would steal a trophy here and there. So actually, sometimes it's interesting to check back a few months later. So what team should we start with, Pimp? In theory, we don't have to go with the most obvious one. What should we start with as the team that you want to talk about at the beginning? Who would you pick?
Oh, well, the thing is the timing of doing an episode like this now, before we actually know if some of these teams will make roster changes or not, makes it even more interesting, right? Because we can have that caveat attached to them. Yeah. But I want to start with Navi because I agree, you know, just to follow up on your point that they did better this first part of the season than I thought they would. Makasi transcended into becoming, you know, a legit player and a potential player that can develop even further. Wonderful, found his footing again, and Navi were one of the teams that you could, you know, say could have won, you know, the major potentially, at least went into the major with a realistic chance of going deep into it. But I will say this, and I know we've spoken a lot about Navi throughout even this season and last season as well. Unless they make a roster change, I think they'll plummet. I think they'll fall back to be a team where, as we kind of had them heading into 2026, you know, I know they did well at the Budapest major, but people forget that the period up to that, they were just 7th, 8th, maybe 6th in the world, you know, not really a team that you thought could do anything. And then they did well in Budapest and people were like, give them another shot. Maybe they can do well. And fair play to Blade and Navi for being competitive in this season and winning trophies as well, as one of the few teams outside of Vitality were they able to win a trophy. So credit to them. I think they had a great season. But I think personally they'll plummet unless they make a roster change. And it's not because the team is bad. It's not because the team is having a clear and obvious flaw to it, you know, as we've spoken about, the obvious candidate to perhaps be replaced would be Immer. For a guy like Frozen, now Frozen has been out saying that he's going to stay in phase, blah, 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 but I don't believe that Blade haven't thought about the possibility of changing a player within Navi the past 12 months, and then he's happy with where they are right now, but I also think that he's very realistic, as you credited him for before, you know, that it's a guy that thinks ahead of time. It's a guy that is not just focused on right here, right now. He's also well aware that if Navi wants to compete against the likes of Falcons, Vitality, other teams, Spirit for that matter as well, who I think is going to ramp it up, something needs to change, because, yeah, sure, they've done well, and sure, they found a level where it's acceptable if you're Navi. Not everyone can be the best, but if I were to look at NAVI and be excited about seeing them play for the rest of 2026, learn something new about them, etc., then I need personally a roster change to refuel some of that excitement for me, because I think they can do well. I don't think they'll win a trophy with this roster if they continue, sort of like with Furia, as I predicted last season. I think they'll be relevant. I think they'll be good. They'll make the playoff, but I think they'll sort of like fizzle out to a point where it's not the NAVI that we build up to the major that could potentially be the winner. That is the one team that beat Vitality in a game. That's the one team that could be dangerous to Vitality for the major. I don't see that NAVI coming out of the player break if they keep the same 5-man roster. And the main reason people may think, why do you say that? What's your basis in that? I think there's something to be said about when a team has been together for a long time. You do lose a bit of that motivation. The players know each other so well. The core of this team has been together for such a long time. It's limited how much Alexi B can get out of a guy like Emma when he's been working with him for 3 or 4 years. You kind of see what you get now, and I think if NAVI delivers what I expect them to deliver, if we go by the premise that you kind of see what you get, then I don't think that level is going to be enough, because I expect Spirit to ramp it up. I expect Falcons to still be at a high level. I expect Vitality to still be at a high level, and what made NAVI exciting was that they were able to fill the place for the teams that didn't deliver in the beginning of 2026. Like Falcons were not performing as well as they should. Spirit weren't performing as well as they should. And the reason why we got excited about NAVI was that they were the second best team in the world who actually did deliver better than Furia, Spirit, and Falcons. I don't think that's going to be the case for the second part of 2026. So for me, they'll go from being a team that, were arguably the second best in the first half of this season to just being number 5, 6, 7. And I don't think Blade would be okay with that. I don't think certain players of NAVI would be okay with that. You hear rumors about Bit, potentially were about to request to leave the team at a certain point, etc., etc. So in order to keep everyone fueled to the fire and keep everyone, interested in this project, I sincerely hope that NAVI will find some player out there that can make them an even more exciting squad.
No, it's actually, funny enough, I have a very similar take. It's why, if people don't know, you could go back on this show, and even when NAVI was literally winning tournaments, look, we did it mainly from a Vitality perspective, but we even said back then, they haven't done anything wrong. They're actually doing an awesome job. Most of the players are playing really well. Blade's killing it, by the way. It seems like he's doing literally a 10 out of 10 job sometimes. But I would still, even just in that landscape where it was just them and Vitality, it felt like, I would still have considered a roster move, because I felt like the worst thing about all the matches they played against Vitality, minus the one where Vitality, well, there was 2 of them, but the second one where Vitality hadn't practiced at all, is, NAVI could play the best game of their lives and they would still narrowly lose. Like, it actually did give me like Team Liquid back in the day against Astralis vibes, where it's like, this is soul crushing to lose like that. Like, normally if you lose, you want to be able to, almost as like a psychic vent, just be able to go, well, I was unlucky and I did a bad job. You don't want to go, yeah, well played, great, we executed our game plan, we vetoed correctly, and shit, second place, get him next time. Like, oh wait, we won't, because we lose every fucking time to this team. So that already was bad enough, but I'm with you. The other thing you have to always be aware of in esports and sports in general is, there's like a famous saying that's supposed to be like a political saying, that's something like, you can't be neutral on a moving train, because the idea is, if the train's moving, essentially you're moving with it, aren't you? Because if you're on the train, you're being pulled forward. So you, to some degree, you always have to be going forwards or backwards, is the idea. And one of the reasons why I think this is relevant is, I actually think NAVI has shown in the past, they did it coming into this year, they did it, you could say, going into 2025, even though people have said this to them before, of like, look, your roster maybe needs, notice it's never like there's a bad player. It's always you need a little bit more firepower, maybe. Like, you've got to trade off some of the team play and all that great shit and lack of ego, all these things they pick up. You need to trade a bit of that off for like a bit more firepower, and then you'll win more of these games. You can win more tournaments. The problem is, NAVI traditionally has shown they'll always give an extra season before they do that. But to me, it can't be that this is the next season. The last one was the next season. Like, you now give, look, it worked for Makazi. That gamble worked. That looks like actually going forwards. I always say this, the most simple way to do this in esports is, if he only had like 2 or 3 tournaments where he was mega high rated and the rest of me was all right, go between the two. That's probably more reasonable as to what's going to happen. Like, split the difference, as it were. He's probably not going to be a 0.8 KPR player every tournament, but he's also probably not going to go back to just being like whatever he was at the major, not very good. He's probably going to be somewhere between the two. So I think if you're being reasonable with that, if you're Blade, the obvious answer here is, Doesn't actually have to be Immer. It's just the obvious one I feel like as an outsider to pick. You just need one player where you get more from that position. And if you do that, I think because essentially one of the cool things about Navi is I think most people agree with me. We want to keep most of what they have. We want to keep a lot of the structure and the strength of the coaching and the way they play the game. It's also a fabulous team to watch play the game. They have a very logical way to play CS. So you want to keep most of that, but you want to upgrade it, but you need another star. Because here's the reason why I actually know Pimp. You can even tell by the way they behave in the server. They know that they need like an extra star. Because, mate, if you look at the positions that Bit has to play, it's a bit like the whole heavy god in G2 thing. If that's going to be your best player or one of your best players, you're going to have a very hard time winning games because that's not a player essentially that's put in the position to carry the game. Like, he can give you more than you expect from the oppositions. That's why I think people have a lot of respect for heavy god. But it's really hard to actually just like 1v9 the game from those sorts of roles. And so I'll give you the example I always think of. This lives rent-free in my head, bro. I remember there was a round, I think it was actually at the Major when they played against Falcons, where they were playing on Anubis, and they had a round where basically all they had was like a hero AK on T side. And bro, they had the hero AK in Bit's hands, because since he has such an insane headshot aim, like it's even logical, you know, if you get over and around the corner, maybe he's the one that'll instantly headshot the CT and then you have another weapon, right? But I was just thinking to myself, bro, what world-class team contending for the Major, if they had a hero AK, that's going in the hands of some demon, mate, like Donk, Monacy. Mate, bro, they would have some killers with that. Listen, Bit's really good, but he's not that player. He's not the player that's going to, like, turn the whole game. Like, mate, when you play against Spirit, you're scared to even give them anyone an AK, because then that goes in a Donk's hand, and then on CT side, he kills everyone. Like, that's the impact. So the problem is, they still don't have that player on Navi. So if you actually even look at who's being suggested, it's not, I think everyone has the right read on Navi. I'm not doing the whole get Frozen because he has to get out of phase. I just think someone like Frozen or Twistzz was the one that I did my shoulders with roster mechanic. These are just players that, like, they're not even supposed to be top 5 players. If they even breach top 10, that's fine. But that would be enough. I actually think that would be enough, like, star power and sort of oomph, as we say, to push you over the line. And then you could actually just be winning these tournaments. Because one thing I hate about this is, in my opinion, you should only stick with rosters that are slightly underpowered, but, you know, have the team element. If you don't have any choices, so, like, I'll give the obvious example to me is at the end of CSGO, I always thought that Heroic was a bit like that. They sort of just needed a little bit more star power. But the point at the time was they couldn't get any mates. Like, they couldn't get the big names from Astralis. There was obviously like a divide between the two teams. And they were Danish-only teams, so there wasn't the option. Navi's an international squad, boys. Beyond getting Russians, it seems like it's the only thing they can't do. The world is their oyster. They can just pick one of these players. It's why if you're Immer, it's not, even though it is slightly a diss, because everyone does keep saying you're the one they want to kick. It's not a diss in the sense that, like, we are saying to recruit, like, potentially top 10 players in the world into your position. We're not saying, like, get anyone. Like, in fact, there's even one thing I'll say at the end of this, I guess, is it would also depend who you're getting. Like, they're actually, despite what fans might think, there are some players, if you suggest, like, for example, I don't want, like, a young player. I didn't mind the Mikaze gamble. It's actually thought the GL one made sense, like, to reshift a few of the roles around. I wouldn't want just some random academy player instead of him. I actually want it to be like a proven player. That's why, for me, it has to be like a Frozen or a Twistzz or Elite, you know, these sorts of levels of player, because I want it to be someone where the gamble's fair to Immer as well. Like, if we get this guy, we are definitely going to win. Like, it's, again, it needs to be some Nork device shit. Yeah. Like, even Nork has to go, yeah, fair enough, I get that one. You were getting, like, a much better player. It almost has to be like that, because I'm with you, Pit. They have to gamble, but at the same time, not literally just anyone. We want it to be, like, a quality player so that we can actually, Navi can be winning tournaments, but, like, for real, because I'm with you. I do think there's no way this second season is as weak at the top. It looks like they did get to be opportunistic on the fact that, as you said, pretty much every contender except Vitality was out of the mix. Spirit was semi-irrelevant. Fury, for whatever bizarre reason, just couldn't get into tournament placings. Falcons obviously just couldn't win. They had massive problems themselves in the playoffs. G2 was semi-irrelevant. I mean, you can go down the line. Aurora was whatever. Like, in theory, pick even 3 of these teams or 2. They're definitely going to be much better and contend for titles. So I'm with you. Now's also the time to do it, because I feel like, here's why. If we wait till the end of the year, mate, I don't think it's as upbeat a conversation about the second season. I think if you keep this roster, the second season's like, yeah, this is why you only, went to one final and then didn't win it, and the rest of the time you were in quarters and semis, and or even, God forbid, like the mids, maybe you just missed the playoffs, which to me would have been unthinkable. But actually, if you look how many teams I just listed off, bear in mind, right, we all expect Aurora's going to get these big upgrades. Who knows about Fury? That one's maybe on the side. But Spirit, Falcon, everyone expects these teams to be better, maybe even G2. So at this point in time, like, there's a world where you've just been squeezed out the top 5 just from that. That's not even being harsh to Navi.
No, that's true. But it's also like, and it's funny when you say, because it's like those players that we want within Navi. I agree with you. I wouldn't want an academy project. I wouldn't want a player like McCarthy where we have to wait 6-9 months before he gets to his full potential. But they're hard to come by. Like they're very hard to come by. I feel like that's maybe a podcast for or an episode for another podcast. But like in terms of the talent pool right now, where like I feel like years ago there would always be like these 3, 4, 5 obvious up and coming players where they were clearly outperforming on their respective teams, and they were just, I guess, timing away from joining a better team. I do feel like those players are harder to come by. I don't know what it is, if the level is just evened out, where it's hard to distinguish yourself and look that much better than the guy next to you, or if there truly is like a lack of talent sometimes, or maybe we hit a period where those, true star quality players are no longer coming as often as we used to. Because the best example I can give you is like, Elish would be, to me, a great fit in Navi, but I think like what's happened the last year with Elish, it is probably now at a point where even Blade would be like, I'm not sure that's
it's a gamble.
It's a big gamble, right? So I also think we owe it to the viewers when we do talk about roster changes, and we want to, as you said, like there's nothing wrong with Navi, and I almost feel sorry for Emma that he's always being brought up. You could argue Alexi B as well to some degree. Would you take a gamble with a Kixen or something like that? To give it a fresh idea, a fresh identity, and maybe give Blade something new to work with. That's also sometimes an angle. That you're replacing not someone because they're doing poorly or you don't believe in them, but you just need a fresh breath of air. You see that in football sometimes when you change manager or coaches, that it doesn't really matter. If you're replacing the guy 1-to-1. But if the players around all of a sudden starts to believe in that guy, that makes them 5% better, then you get your effect in that regard. There's only one player I would like to see in Navi, and that's, maybe not worthy of a conversation here, but I think NIP is a bit of a joke as it is right now, the way they run, the way they're performing. And Kaspersky is a player that I've been highlighting plenty of times. I think he's ready to the next level. I think it's a bit of a joke that he, first and foremost, wasn't part of the major, because he's way too good not to be part of the majors consistently every single time. But I also do think that I can't say certainly, but potentially he'd be a bit of a gamble as well. He could make a team like Navi even better. And if you can go from being a player that is not at the majors and go into a team like Navi and have me saying that you can make them even better, then I feel like there must be a lot of potential in him. I don't know how you rate him, if you've been following how he does in NIP, but I think Kaspersky to me is one of those few players, that you can't put him in the same category as Frozen, Twistzz, you name it. But I think within a relatively short amount of time, he could be that next guy he's going to join a top team. It's just a question of when, and if not now for Navi, then maybe never for him.
I mean, I'll even give people like a bonus reason as to why you could do it. Like, I can't promise this because I can't speak for him, but if people don't know, since Kaspersky just played under the following people: Glaive as an IGL in Ents, and then also obviously with most recently Snappy. Like, I can tell you for Snappy in particular, he's someone who's actually very open. Like, I know in the past, I believe even Apex reached out when he had Spinks to ask Snappy, like some of the questions about how he used him in Ents, for example. Like, he's the sort of person, by the way, a bit like traditional sports. You could reach out and probably ask this guy, like, look, obviously you'd have to sign the player already. I doubt he's going to want the player to leave his team, but he's the sort of person who would probably tell you what he's like and give you the profile and get you have a sense of, is this the right player for your team, etc. He's quite a reasonable person in that sense. So no, I don't even hate that. I do like people in general. This is why I actually like the old system of CS. When someone's played under real IGLs, then I have a sense that they know how real CS works and how you do the build-up play and how call a mid-round and how you actually prep for a game, and simple things that actually you take for granted if you've only been out there in the world of FPL-style POG CS, where you think a call is like, get a pick mid, or whatever, some like NA POG shit, which isn't even real CS as far as I'm concerned. So, no, I'm with you. Right, here's the fun thing. We can actually spin this into not just like projecting in a trajectory, but actually we can do a prediction, because we've got a poly market here. If you go to the props section, obviously there's not many games going on right now, it's the off season, there is actually a market that says, will Navi make a roster move before September? So here's the key thing. Obviously, we're in July right now. There's all of August still. So in theory, because remember, you don't have to make it right before the player break ends. So this will allow you right up until the beginning of September, basically. And the market, interestingly enough, is at the moment at a 44% chance. So people actually now have decided it's not going to happen overall. The traders on the site are overall trending with no. I've got to say, Pim, I actually think it does happen. I actually think they will make a move. So I think this is good value. I think you get excellent value getting it on 44%. 100%, because I'll tell you one reason why. Without leaking anything, every now and then, especially if I'm ever at events, I do go and try and talk to people like Blade or hit him up with a DM sometime. And one thing I'll say about the fact I think he's so reasonable is, I even got the vibe from talking to him, like, put it this way, I was almost certain you would never see JL come back to NAVI after certain conversations I had. And the reason why is, I actually think one thing about Blade that's interesting is this is actually quite a good trait for a manager or a coach, by the way. He's very unsentimental, actually. He's not the guy because he won with someone before. I think it's actually one of the biggest problems pros and top level people have in CS. I think people like Nico, I always joke, the reason he keeps recruiting people who used to be good like 8 years ago is it's still in his head that they were beating him back then, you know, but it's like, yeah, but Nico, he's not that good now though, is he? Like, it's not 5 years ago. Blade's not that guy, mate. Like, I think Blade is so unsentimental. Like, once something's been and gone and he doesn't see value, he's looking to the future now. He's not going to go back and he's not going to get an up. It's why actually I think the most gangster thing that he never gets credit for is, as far as you can tell, if you read between the lines, Pip, he basically said to Simple, nah, you can't come back. After Simple was like a year and a half removed from being the player of the year. Remember, he's the player of the year in 2022. As far as we know, at some point in 2024, before they popped off, Simple was sort of like, right, I'll come back to the game now, yeah, and replace Wonderful, because obviously I'm way better than. And then essentially Blade was sort of like, nah, you don't actually, so see ya. Mate, how many people would dare do that? So I actually think he does do it, mate. I think he's ruthless enough that he's given them a try. I think actually, if you ever look, he did. Here's the thing, he's more professional, so he doesn't come off as badly. He's done, if you go and read his interviews at the end of this last season, bro, he's done some that Virgin to Dastan type territory where he's made it clear, you know, he's not happy when they lose or there's issues. So I also do think that, again, this isn't someone who's like deluded and sitting there like, my team's the best players. Well, I think if the move is there, I think he'll do it personally. Do you think it happens before September?
That's the question, right? Because I think there's good value in this one, especially with the chance of being at 44% right now. But I'm also afraid, you know, with the history, as you kind of alluded to beforehand, you know, that Navi is the kind of team and Blade is the kind of guy that just wants to give it one more chance. And I mean, personally, I would do it. I think we both agree on that. You know, if it was me, if I had the range of that team, I'd do it 100%. And I think they're also debating it, considering it. Maybe it has already happened, you know, behind the scenes. We don't know that. But I'm also a bit afraid, given the history of Navi, that it may not happen. You know, the fact that they did win a trophy in Atlanta, the fact that they were the second best team in the world, that Blade maybe still believes that, okay, we saw McCarthy do well, and I, you know, as Blade, and that's the counter to what you're saying. You know, I also do think Blade believes so much in his own abilities that he think, okay, I can still make McCarthy 10% better. I can still make maybe still, you know, make Wonderful 10% better. And if they come together and they, you know, become 10% better, then I think we can be the best team in the world. And I feel like Blade is the kind of guy that he's not going to change roster or do anything drastic before he feels that, okay, I've done my part. You know, I don't think I can make this guy any better. Or I think this guy has shown his true potential, or he's shown his limit. Now I'm ready to change him up. And part of me feels that Blade maybe still believes there's a little bit more to get out of some of these players. And if that's the case, then given the history for Navi, I think he could, you know, end up, you know, being like, okay, we give it 6 more months and then the change would happen in the winter break. So it's not one of those where I'm certain it's going to happen. So I'm kind of split between what I want to happen and what I want for Navi and what may actually happen. So I think in terms of the prediction right here and for people, you know, putting their money where their mouth at, you know, I'd say a 44% chance is within my range. You know, I'm leaning towards yes with you, but maybe at a 51% to 49.
Because here's the thing, to switch back to the big heads. I'll just say, one of the reasons why I gave so much praise for what Blade has done in Navi in general, like I even think the most of the players, this is what's funny. Listen, it has to sound like a diss, because I'm basically saying, like, I think someone else should replace you in Navi, but the reason it's not actually a diss to him is, I don't actually think he can play much better, mate. I've seen him play his whole career now. I've seen him actually have times where I actually think in some ways he actually has gotten better as a player since when they had the run in 2024. I think when people were saying remove him in 2024, it made more sense. Sometimes it looked like the numbers were a bit inflated because they won basically almost every game, and he had a really strong team, so like he had like a lot of help in the squad. I think he's actually had times where he's played better. The problem is he's just never going to be Nico or something like that, is he? Like, he's just going to be an above average rifler. So I also think as well, by the way, just as an aside, there's also a world where, look, he's not going to unfortunately get as much team success, but if you send this guy to another team, because I agree with you on the football point, I mean, if people want an obvious example of this in action, how about Marcus Rashford? Like, if you saw, he had to leave Man United. Like, he actually himself wasn't any good. They obviously didn't think he was good in the team anymore. It all gone to shit. And the second he went to Barcelona, mate, he was just good again. Like, if anything, actually, that's why there's that weird thing where even though I actually do think Anthony Gordon's pretty good, it's bizarre that now he's not at Barcelona. Now he's just not even going to be there anymore. They had a pretty good season. So I think similarly, right, if you put him on another team, look, the team is unlikely to be as good as this NAVI team is, but he might play better even. Maybe you'd even get more of what he wants of the game. Maybe without the bird system, he'd be freed up a little bit. I could totally believe that's true. Who knows? Maybe down the line, I'll give you a random one. Maybe one day he ends up in an Aurora, right? That's his boy Ash over there. That's someone who's worked with him before. That's success. So I think, again, sort of to diss him. Anyway, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's pivot, because I'll tell you the obvious spicy one that I think has to be discussed, Pip. And people are probably going to be surprised by this. It's got to be Falcons, isn't it? So here's how I'll tee you up, mate. I actually want to just save what I think and see where Pimp's going. Because here's the thing I think we all have to do. When I made my prediction on Hot Take Point 8 that Navi could win the major, I did say it that way, but I never said they would. I just said essentially they can, because at the time, this is before they played Vitality, even the idea that they would beat Vitality was very low chance to most people. And then we all knew Spirit was in the semis and then probably Fury in the final. So if you looked at it, even if you thought they were going to win one or two of those, the odds they'd win all three. And then also the way they did it was obviously absurd, wasn't it? It was like the closest margins ever, hero players, the most insane calls. Like what people don't seem to realise is I was just essentially extremely optimistic about the potential of the team. And even then, I'll totally admit, I actually think they exceeded even that, Pimp. Like some of the shit they were doing in those, specifically the quarters and the semis, was like I guess what was actually my dream as to what karrigan would be able to do with a new teammate. Even that seemed something implausible. Like when you saw the stats and like every single player's like kills per round went up late in games. This is like fantasy shit. But the reason I bring all that up is I do think people now have all just flipped, and everyone now is like, well, yeah, of course they always could have won in karrigan's. Like there was almost none of that, mate, before this major. In fact, most people, because of CAC, thought they were going to like be a bust of a team, and this was, you remember that the idea was it was a desperate move to get karrigan. So I want everyone to be reasonable now. Going into the second season, we're not all now just going to pretend this is the new number one team and they're going to win all the tournaments. Like, surely we have to realise that, like, to me, I even think if we're going to say that thing of like the karrigan effect at majors, well, that's at majors. What happens in a normal tournament? So I think this is a tricky one to predict, actually, Pimp. You can go a lot of ways. Where does Pimp see Falcons in the normal circuit before we get to the next major?
I think it's gonna be exciting. It's gonna be fun. And it's gonna be incredibly close. I by no means do I expect Falcons to take over from Vitality and be the number one team in the world on a consistent basis as of right now. But I will say that, you know, when I assess Falcons and when I look at them and I'm like, okay, there's two ways you can go about it. It's been this obsession for Nico, for Modesty for that matter as well, for Falcons as a whole, Sonic as a coach, to win the major and finally win a big trophy. And now that you've done it, two things can happen. You know, the gas goes out of the balloon, or all of a sudden you're on a streak, you're on a momentum, you're on a roll, and you start to actually compete at the level you're supposed to. I think when I look at the lineup, though, I feel like there should be enough hunger within that lineup. I think it's fair to say that karrigan may realize that he's on his final big team, you know. So if you want to go out with a bang, then you better make sure that you get the absolute most out of the fact that you're playing with a young Kyusuke, you're playing with a very hungry and young Monesi, and you're still playing with a Nico that is very relevant in terms of an individual player and maturing and still contributing to the team. And if you're Twistzz, I'll be honest, you know, this may sound a bit cruel, but it's not that Twistzz could be replaced by anyone, but I think Twistzz realizes as well, like, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Like, here, I'm on a team that could potentially win a lot of trophies, that could maybe win a second major, and for my career and my legacy, that would be mega, because if Twistzz joins pretty much any other team, he's not the reason that you're winning the major. He's the reason you're competitive. He's a good player, he's a solid player, and he fits well into Falcons and could fit well into other teams, but he's not a heavy guard or a bit, you know, in the same role on other teams where he can be the one that elevates that team to win a major. So when I assess Falcons right now, they should be hungry. You know, Monesi should be hungry. He's always hungry. He's the most motivated individual I've ever come across as a player. Like, he just wants to play Counter-Strike, be good at Counter-Strike, win stuff. Twistzz is the same, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. karrigan, I feel like from what I know him, you know, from experience, like, he also realizes that this is the time where he needs to hone in, win as much as possible, and then maybe cement the legacy as him being the greatest in-game leader of all time. Because if it just fizzles out now and Falcons will go to quarters, go to semifinals, go back to the Falcons before where they didn't win stuff but were still competitive, I think that leaves a room for discussion for karrigan as well. So in terms of them being hungry, I think they're up there. Now, a hungry Falcons, are they going to beat Vitality? Are they going to beat Spirit? Are they going to beat those teams? I'm not sure, to be honest. I feel like this is one of the hardest things to assess right now, because I don't think they'll be I don't think they'll be good enough to dominate the circuit. I don't think they'll be good enough to win 3 or 4 trophies, for the remainder of this part of the season. But I also do expect Falcons, if Polymarket had one right now, will Falcons win another trophy this year? I'd be inclined to say yes. Like there's too much skill. They're too good. And now karrigan is having a bit more time with Falcons as well. Let's pretend they went to the CAC again, they'd win that tournament, just based on the fact that they now have played together more. That doesn't mean that they'll win some of the big ones. Doesn't mean they'll win EWC. Doesn't mean they'll win the next major, but they'll definitely be competitive. So I don't know about you. I think they're hungry enough to do well, but I don't know if I believe enough in it. And part of the reason as well is karrigan's individual level. I know it's something people don't want to discuss, and I know it's something that people think can coexist with them being great, but I'll tell you this, was he a net positive for Falcons at the major? Was he a big part of the reason why they won the major? 100%. Would they do it again? 100%. But if you want to consistently win trophies, you cannot run around with a player that is at a 0.45 kills per round, a 0.72 rating or something. Like, I feel like history has proven that over and over and over again, that there is a limit to how bad you can be on the server. And it doesn't matter if you're surrounded by 4 great players or 3 superstars and a test. Like, there'll be a time where that, if he consistently, I would say, under-delivers at that point and doesn't add up in his fracking potential, then that's going to be an issue for Falcons, and that's going to cost them trophies. And then the whole case and the whole argumentation is that, okay, he's been very focused on calling and integrating himself into the lineup, that's taking away the focus from him fracking. Now that he's more, in sync with the team and each player knows their roles even more, and he doesn't have to micromanage as much anymore, and it becomes a bit more of a motion thing within the team. Maybe then his level would raise, That's the question mark. We don't know if that's going to happen. If it happens, I'm way more inclined to say yes, then Falcons can contest to be the best team in the world, but I'm not sure, because I've looked at karrigan and I've looked at the tendency of him as a player. Like the last 2 years, it's just been going down and down and down and down and down, and I thought we came to a point where in FaZe that, okay, it can't get any worse than this. Surely what he's doing in FaZe right now, from an individual point of view, it can't get any worse. And then it became worse even in Falcons. So I'm not sure if that trend's even stop. So that's honestly my biggest question mark. I know people are like, yeah, karrigan is a great caller and he's the best thing ever happening to Falcons, but it can coexist that he can be a problem for Falcons as well if his fracking is not changing. Because if it continues to go downwards, which it has been for the last 2 years, then there'll be other teams who are simply just too good. Like, you're not going to beat a Spirit. You're not going to beat a Vitality. You're not going to beat even Furia, for that matter, as well, if you're playing 4v5 consistently at every single tournament.
That's why, to me, the cope or the hope, if you're a Falcons fan, is that because he only had the 60 days and 3 tournaments, that karrigan's just spent too much of his sort of mental resources and time working on the other things, like Kiyasuke and how do they work on a new base and things that we hadn't seen before in the game. Twistzz looks like he's sort of reinvigorated in the way he engages with the game. You hope that what it is he's put all his time in that, because I can tell you, karrigan is one of those people, like God B, where even if they're terrible in the game, they definitely put in the hours, like doing the DMing and stuff like that. It's not they're not trying. It's just in their case, they both, like I picked 2 people there who both really old players, but who are legendary minds, and you mainly keeping them for the mind in the game. So here's the good news is this, mate. Like, because the numbers are so impossibly low, we're actually not saying you even have to be vaguely competitive as a player. We just have to be a tiny bit better. If you do a tiny bit better, it actually lets a lot of the pressure off the stars, because that's the one problem I do have, Pimp, is it is not the case to me that the major proves karrigan can frag at 0.4 KPR, and actually this is a fine way to do a team. I even said the whole time before and after Falcons that, like, this is one of the only rosters I think this could even work with. In fact, the joke I make on other shows is I think one of the only other rosters would have been Furious rosters if he could have had Fallen. But I also think there's enough talent in that team that you could maybe have a game where they all pop off and it wouldn't matter if you don't frag very well. The problem is, it's unreasonable even with this level of super team to tell 4 players. That's the other thing, guys. 4 players. Like, it's bad enough to say I want 3 players to be like among the top rated players. Like, you can't say all 4 have to do it, because actually then, by the way, then you're putting an unfair amount of pressure on someone like Twistzz. Like, actually, if anything, I think he overperformed at this major and did stuff like the coolest compliment to Twistzz is this: look, mate, if they don't win many trophies in the second season, you will immediately, like him, become the player where it's like, obviously in your case, it's always the get bait. You can't get heavy gun apparently, but get bait, Yimpat, these people all say the same names again. They'll say they're replacing, but the compliment is this: no one's saying it right now because of actually how dope the performance at the major was. So I think, but that only buys you time though, let's be real. So my problem is this: I do think people are missing 2 key points here. One is this. One of the reasons specifically I did the prediction, like they can win the major, was actually based on things where I joke that it's not real analysis because it's basically what you call like narrative analysis. So I would just say this. It's not analysis in the sense that like I'm guessing at what I call like intangibles, things like how clutch is someone, how good are they under pressure. So one thing I always point out to people is, because I've been thinking about that topic a lot from when karrigan was in FaZe, like what is FaZe bullshit? We used to call it FaZe magic. What is FaZe bullshit? And if you think realistically, it isn't actually what people always say, which is if you listen to the commentators, they just make it sound like any stage you go on, instantly FaZe bullshit is active. No, it's the biggest events. It's the prestige events. It's when you have a Katowice, a Cologne, a Krakow, a fucking major. And the thing essentially that I would describe, because it's what's just karrigan bullshit, isn't it? What karrigan bullshit is, as far as I can tell, it's actually a really cool story. If you're a kid out there, it's like your anime stories that you love, those shonen anime for kids where it's all really aspirational. You try to be a hero and get better and level up. Because what's cool is, as far as I can tell, one of the coolest things about karrigan's career story is he did. If you ask him, the reason he'll totally admit it wasn't even a problem that they kicked him out of FaZe the first time is he wasn't this guy back then, mate. Back then, if you put him in the prestige event, in the big moment, in the semi or the final, he would be the guy where he'd often choke, or he'd make the wrong call, or he'd do sometimes nothing, and then the other person makes the hero play and they win the game. One thing that I think's so cool about his career is I feel like when he went to Mouse and then he came back to FaZe, he just was on some like, you know what, fuck it. If that's the way my career went, then I'm just going to send it. You know what? I've already lost all these heartbreaking losses anyway. Like, it's already gotten as bad as it can. You know what? I'm going to gamble. And as what you've seen is, you know what? He still lost a bunch of major finals. But his teams have this extra quality where, crucially for me, but it only applies in that setting. And the reason why it's so key is this. Is because he can't replicate that setting. Like, even though there is certainly a difference between if you're a rookie, if you're a foot player, and this year you've got to play in any arena, it's a big deal. It's a step up. But it's different the major, though, bro. The majors and the prestige ones, because I think even the best players at the major, it's in the back of your head of sort of like, first of all, I have to win these in my career like Nico, but then you only get so many chances. And usually you have to wait 2 or 3 months for the next one. It's not like normal siesta. It's like, if you lose this one, fuck it, get the next one, win the next one, and you're right back in the boat. So I think one of the things he essentially exploits is that most teams are quite nervous in those settings, and most people, communication drops down and people make mistakes, and there's openings where if you are a genius caller like him, that's where it's going to be most effective, bro, because as you saw from his players, when they believe it and they just go for it, well, he has outrageously talented players, so miracle shit can happen that obviously he didn't call. Like, I keep joking, like, obviously he didn't tell Twistzz, like, quick, shoot up and to the left, like, you know, when he like on does too, when he shot up like that. But that's some shit Twistzz did. But the point is, people go for those players because karrigan creates this environment where, just like the other team thinks is going to happen, he thinks it as. If you saw those vlogs where he was saying about the speeches, he's aware of this as a factor. I think he even says something when they get to the playoffs. I mean, I think it was before they played Vitality, of sort of like, other teams are aware, like, you know, this can happen in this sort of a game, and like the game can get crazy. The problem with that is I don't think it works in normal tournaments, Pimp. I think when you go back to a normal tournament, if someone like the teams they played here, G2, NAVI, Spirit, if they play in the normal tournament and they're playing just as well, they just win the game, mate. Like, all this crazy magic doesn't happen because it's not the same sort of stakes, it's not the same intensity. So to me, I think you have to be more realistic. I think if you look at Falcons, realistic, I'm with you, they don't dominate. I imagine Vitality's number one again, personally. I think they just bounce back. If anything, they're probably going to be demons because of all this bloody major win, and they feel irrelevant because they got knocked out in the quarterfinals. So I think for me, Falcons, if they do really well, I think they can be the second best team. You know, they can be the team that challenges. They can be in the NAVI spot, as it were. Except what's cool with them, obviously, is because they do have the firepower. I don't think the NAVI spot for them means come second a bunch of times. It means you win the odd event. You know, it's going to be more like Fury in the end of 2025. You know, if you do really well, you win the tournament. But I imagine, like, a bit like that Fury, it'll be really close margins, though. It'll still be hard to win. It'll be like epic matches. So to me, I haven't personally picked as either the second or third best team. It basically depends on the other teams. I need to know, does NAVI make a player change? Is Spirit going to actually be better when they get the coaching staff back? If these things happen, then I think it's, by the way, I also think it's fine to be second or third and win trophies. The real problem Falcons always had before was they could be second or third, they just didn't win the trophy. That's the real part, if everyone's being honest. I know we always complain everyone deletes the end of 2025. That's just because they never won a trophy, Pimp. Like, I know it sounds mad, but I actually think outside of winning the trophy, they were pretty good. Like, they were in all those fucking matches. The key thing for me with Falcons is this. I do think if you look at the major, the two people you can't expect to play like that every tournament is obviously Nico and Twistzz. Like, that's unrealistic, I think. Like, even Nico, I actually think that was some, like, destiny shit shit, mate, because he's not even really in the roles to do the carry performance he had in the final and the semi. He just low-key sort of did it because he was on some miracle run to his major. Like, that was almost like the universe was closing that chapter of like, look, here's one last Nico star performance. I think realistically he goes not as bad as it was before, but he goes back to something similar. Hopefully he just doesn't choke, right? So to me, the best part about Falcons is, I actually think the person who should be the happiest is Monacy, mate, because I'm with you on the Karrigan thing. If you're Karrigan's smart enough to know this might be the last great team he ever has. So he's going to absolutely have his foot, the pedal all the way down. He's going to try and win every trophy. But also, if you're Monacy, mate, you've been in some flawed rosters. You've been in some teams where you ought to be the hardcore. Now's your time where if you just play great CS, you're in the Zemu seat for me, basically, mate. If you just play out your best game, you get to win the trophy and the MVP every tournament. That's got to be a really motivating feeling compared to the years when G2 on Falcons where it's like, if I play the best tournament I can, maybe we come second. Like, that's whack, bro. Like, that'll sap anyone. So I think the coolest thing is if you're Monacy. I think for the others, I'm going to be very reasonable. I don't think you can expect this major performance. If I even tell people, bro, how many times at the major did they almost lose? And if they lose any of those games before, I think, the Spirit game, we're not talking about them the same way. Like, even if they'd have beaten Vitality but lost the Spirit, by the way, that was absolutely possible in that game. Yeah. I don't think we're having this same crazy conversation. In fact, I think even some people are still saying kick Cessus, like, or was it the right move even, you know? So, did they fluke Vitality? Would have been the topic, wouldn't it? So I think if we're just being reasonable, I'm still confident. I think they'll be a good team. I'm excited for the project. But I think when you have that much firepower required because of the Karrigan point you're making, it's unlikely it can turn up each tournament. Like, I don't think that's a plausible scenario. If they really do, by the way, then fuck the whole GOAT thing. He's like, it's Jesus of CS at this point. I think you just make everyone frag twice as good. It's insane.
That's the thing, because there's two things I want to take away from what you're saying right here. One is, I think that's going to be the issue with the whole narrative around Falcons, because I agree, being realistic, maybe they're the second best, third best team in the world, you know, for the second part of the season, but they were also the second or third best team in the late 25, right? And they got shat all over, you know, because they didn't win the trophies, right? So the whole narrative for Falcons will probably, maybe it'll be a little less now, you know, now that they won the major, and whenever you say like, well, they don't win trophies, well, we fucking won the major, so shut the fuck up, you know, could be a response to that. But it was always the case of, if they don't win a tournament, it's a failure, you know, every single tournament. So is that going to change now because they won the major? Is it now okay for them to be just the second best or the third best team in the world after what arguably is the best team of all time in Vitality, at least from a public notion? So I agree, you know, it would be nice to be reasonable, and it would be nice if people could be reasonable when it comes to Falcons. So I'm not sure about that, you know. Had that been a polymarket thing, would the public actually treat Falcons like they treat everyone else? We're probably at a 50-50 at this point, you know. So I'm still not convinced in that regard. The second point I want to make here is something I find super interesting, because that's your whole point about Karrigan and the magic and the kind of environment he's trying to make within his teams in order to perform and have everyone motivated and everyone working towards the same common goal. Like, as you said, like, it's impossible to recreate the tension that you have at a major. It's impossible to recreate the way you approach it, the motivation, the willingness, the desire to win. That's why I give Apex so much credit for somehow being able to do that, you know, to some degree in Vitality, where he keeps everyone mad hungry at all times. Like, all of them are hungry dogs, you know. That's the way they talk, that's the way they play, that's the way they practice. Now, it made me think of something where we relate to sports that have a higher history or a longer history than we do. That, you know, take football as an example. We love the football references, right? There's also coaches in football who are notoriously known for being great cup coaches, you know. Take Thomas Tuchel as an example, right? He was hired to the English national team. Now he's a great cup coach in the sense that he's always finds a way to set up his teams for the Champions League games, for now the World Cup, you know, for England, you know, whereas his league domestic play has always been a bit under question, never really been as strong. You don't really realize why they're so inconsistent. Part of that is probably the way that he can set up the team, you know, to perform at the highest level week in, week out. And I see the same tendency in Karrigan. The other example would be Antonio Conte, you know, who's also a famous coach in football, who is notoriously known for whenever he goes to a new club, you almost guarantee that he's going to win the league title for you. He's done it in Chelsea, he's done it in Inter Milan, he's done it everywhere else. But he's also known for never winning the knockout games in the Champions League. Like, he always sucks in the cups. He's never winning the regional cup tournament. So I have a feeling that Karrigan has transcended to that point where when you pick a tournament and when you look at the major, or you look at a Krakow, or when you look at one of those tournaments you mentioned before where these are the pinnacle tournaments, he has that, you know, I guess, aura and the way of activating the team and really making everyone work towards the common goal. But his day-to-day gameplay, his day-to-day work, his day-to-day, let's call it league play, is pretty weak. And that was the case in FaZe for a very, very long time. He was quote unquote saved by a couple of miracle runs at the major, with the one in Shanghai, with the one in Budapest as well. Even though that one was considered a massive fluke even by himself, I'm pretty sure. So I think that's the way I want to label karrigan now. And if we then take that knowledge and we put that into Falcons now, then I think they're week to week, or they're tournament to tournament play, the CAC to the PGL to the Pro League. I think their performances at those are going to be inconsistent, and they're going to be worrisome to some degree. But I have no doubt that when we head into the major, then that sort of like energy, that intensity, that sort of like karrigan magic, or whatever you want to call it, that's going to come again. And that's the same feeling I have whenever I watch a Thomas Tuchel game with England, the World Cup. I have a feeling that you're going to do well at the World Cup, mainly because you now have a coach who is like, he doesn't give a fuck about, what players he leaves behind at home. Cole Palmer not selected. He even had I think like hinted at some point with Jude Bellingham that unless he buys into whatever vision he had for the team, then I can leave you at home, bro. You may be the best midfielder or whatever hybrid midfielder you are in the world right now, but if you don't buy into my project, I'll leave you at home. So he's very pragmatic, and he's very very cruel in the way that he manages the team. And I think karrigan is the same. I think he has that ability to be the guy that would do well at, let's say, one-off tournaments, or a couple of one-off tournaments that you select throughout the season. But Falcons, to me, with karrigan, are never going to be that team that just dominates every single tournament, because that's not the way karrigan works. That's not the way that he's motivating himself. He needs that big, higher goal, that bigger intensity in order to be at his best. And I think the best way to reference that is like we see in some football coaches as well, where they are very good at the cups, very good at the knockout stage, very good in the Champions League, but day to day, week to week league play, they fall short.
Yes, it's even if you want to do like a club equivalent, it's even the reason why historically it makes a lot of sense why my favourite team, Liverpool, is actually much better in Europe than they are in the league. Because in the league, it's more like blade shit. It's boring, like day-to-day stuff. Winning the league really is stuff like you would have drawn 1-1 with a team, but you score late, a goal and win 2-1. But it's like a random game against some shit team you don't even care about in week 7. It's just at the end of the season when you need that extra 2 points. That's where it comes from. Whereas I'm with you, though. If the reason historically why Liverpool does well in Europe is because we have a stadium that does what karrigan's trying to create. It creates this feeling of like pressure, and the underdog can do anything and all of a sudden. And similarly, that's why I gave the analogy. Not only did the fans of Liverpool know that, but then the players who go to their stadium know that. It's become its own sort of like mind ghost for some of the opponents, which is, by the way, if you look at this point in time, I always tell people this is actually one of the things I said in the prediction on Hot Take Point made. It's not just that like karrigan gets his own team to bleed, because he obviously does. You can see it in all the vlogs. It's that actually probably the most effective thing, in my opinion, is that the other teams believe this shit. Like, I actually think I almost wish we could get the comms from other teams that they lost in the tournament. Obviously, the sad thing is most people don't release comms. If they do, they'll do it if they win the tournament. But I bet some of these teams at some point against FaZe and Falcons have even said some karrigan bullshit or some, they're doing FaZe bull. Of course, it must be the vibe when it starts to happen. But yeah, it's just unlikely that can continue tournament to tournament. And also, that's actually why I agree with you. I think we did a really good job making that point in the first season. Even though Apex is doing things like playing a great game, calling a great game, he's one of the, I actually think the most underrated quality he has is just crazy hunger to win. Like, he actually does sort of get it that, like, when you are in that position, like I said, I think karrigan's going to try and do this too. It's just he doesn't have as good a team to do it with. When you actually finally are back in position where, like, the tournaments are, like, within your sights, as it were, you can't let those go. If you're a young man, we'll get back there, we won this one, who cares about the other one? No, when you're at the end of your career like these guys are, they know that, like, you can sort of tell that they have an awareness that in like 3 years, maybe they don't have a chance to win a tournament anymore, and they're just sitting looking at a Liquipedia saying who was the greatest and how did I stack up, and they want as many majors and trophies and prestige as they want their list maxed out, bro. Like, that's why actually I think it's cool. You know what, let's spin it into the obvious discussion in a second about vitality. We'll do that, but first there is actually one more polymarket angle, and it's this one. There is a market here that says, will JL, former NAVI player, appear as an analyst at an S-tier tournament in 2026? Obviously, they mean the rest of 2026. He did it already technically at Krakow, but that's the market, right? And actually, believe it or not, it's at 51% chance. So right now, the traders have it bang in the middle almost. I've got to say, Pip, this is a rare area where basically we don't know this for a fact. We don't have this, but based on sort of things that we hear within the industry, we might actually be able to help people out as to what this might happen with this one, because we're essentially everyone's guessing, but let's say we have maybe a slightly more informed guess, because basically the things I'd heard, Pimp, was this: despite the fact that there are certain people who get hired for events that maybe, you know, people don't like or do like, and it can be different for fans, I actually think fans in general did notice JL had problems. And let's just say, I heard behind the scenes people noticed it too, Pimp. Like this isn't something that like the tournament is unaware of and that they think, no, it was great. Like people are aware there was some issues with that before. So essentially, the vibe we're getting is actually seems like a pretty good value to say yes on, right? Like he will, he will not appear. Like the value is in he will just become a pro player again, and you won't see him doing the analysis thing. Like it's already basically implied he's also going to play as a pro soon. Like he's put 1 million tweets out in play. What would you say, Pip? Would you go with no for this?
I would go with no, almost 100%. You know, I'm surprised it's not like, I don't know, down to
20 or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know what happened in the end of June. It looks like there was a spike, but I'm the kind of person, and I'm sure JL can take this. I'm the kind of person who likes to see people in their right environment. I like to see people do what they're good at. And let's just say that I think JL is a much better Counter-Strike player than he's an on-camera presence kind of guy. So if anything, I would want JL to play Counter-Strike on the server and not necessarily talk too much about Counter-Strike, because clearly there's a massive skill difference in those two abilities from his point of view. Also, I mean, I think what he did in Mouse when he came back and played as a stand-in, he was quite good, you know, for a player that has been out of the game for quite some time. So I can't see why not. He would be attractive to them. He's also kind of like a mood guy. For a team like Mouse, you know, he's been hinted to go to for quite some time, that I think they'd benefit from. But I don't know, you know, I don't know where he's going to end up, but I'm quite certain it's going to be on the server and not in front of a camera, at least not unless he's winning a game and gets to do an interview.
Yes. So I think that's actually a rare case of where we at least have, let's say, we have more feelers out there than you guys. So I thought we'd just give you some value there. Right, as I said, let's spin it into the Vitality discussion, because I've got to say, Pip, if people want to compare this to last year, this is why actually winning the major versus not winning the major is enormous when you're at the level Vitality is. Because even though I certainly didn't think they'd have so many tournaments, so they failed to win last year, actually, I absolutely did think going into the second season, you're going to have a hangover after this, bro. Remember, they'd won like 7 tournaments in a row. You've actually won the major as well, which was the Kappa at the time, the Austin major. So you've done the big one. The real reason why is one of the reasons we're praising Apex for the ambition and the hunger is because think about even that metaphor of hunger. Well, yeah, once some people have eaten enough, they're full. They don't want to keep eating anymore. They're not like you back in the day, mate. Like some people, they just eat a meal. That's it. That's it. I'm okay. I don't even want dessert, maybe. So I think people underestimate Pimp. There's a lot of players like that. Like I know a lot of players who had one period where it was really good, where they won, or they won one big one, and it's not like they don't want to win again, but they wouldn't live or die for it, you know what I mean? It's more like they'd like to win under the right circumstances, and if they don't, okay, cool, I won my major, or I had my period where I was at the top. What's amazing about Vitality is I do think the reason why they had a drop-off last year is it's really hard when you've won 7 tournaments in a row, and the biggest one, the ones that's defining, to then come to the next. Remember, they had Cologne right after that. That was how the circuit was last year. It's really hard to come into Cologne with the same like drive, focus, you know, and logically, if you've had the whole season where you've won, you're going to definitely take that. I imagine you don't touch one key of a keyboard in that off season, mate, because like you saw this season where they tried to get extra time at Astralis style because of the burnout without playing those American events. It's really hard to get any real time off, because if you don't win, normally the perception is come back a week early before the play break ends and get some scrims in and so I think the difference is, Pimp, it's way more likely this time around, in my opinion, this is the one where you start 3 days early and you get fucking the scrim session down, because I think actually what's cool is fans are so fickle. I did see this at the major because it was the quarterfinals, even though to me, but they lost to the winner of the tournament. As far as I know, for all I know, they were the second best team there, Pimp. Like, I can't even say that any of the others, like, I don't care that Fury got a better bracket and finished there. None of those teams beat Vitality. If they did, then come see me and we'll have the conversation. So if I'm Vitality, I would just personally feel like, you know what, 1, that performance might never happen for Falcons again, and 2, mate, see, we had a bad game in the quarterfinals. That doesn't normally happen. Like, we can come back tomorrow and be number 1 again. And in fact, because everyone's written us off now, fuck it, I actually think they come out at the beginning of the second season like demons, man. I could see them just smashing this first tournament and having a bunch of, like, surely it all turns around now. I don't buy the idea like Vitality's done. I'm amazed how many people are willing to call a team this good done, mate. Like, they're going to win tournaments. They're going to be the team of the season. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
I don't even feel like I'm saying anything brave by saying that. It just seems obvious to me, mate.
No, but then I'll try to one up you though, because I hope they won't come out. You know, I hope they won't come out bursting and actually be at the top level, because I think if I were part of the evaluation in Vitality, and this is just speaking from having the outside look at Vitality and how they managed the calendar, I think what fucked them up, in the season, the reason why they didn't win Cologne was the planning of the calendar. And I don't think they made a mistake, but they got screwed by the fact that they were so willing and focused on winning the ESL Grand Slam that they had to say yes to the invites to the tournament that kept them in the States, even though they would have liked the break there and not practice. Because, I know people are like, but they didn't practice and they were just chilling and they were on a holiday. Like, sure, when you're traveling with your team, you may not be in the practice room, but you're still forced to be with your teammates. You're still doing teammate activities. And as much as you want to think that everything is kumbaya, they may be friends, but they would rather be with their girlfriends at home or be with their family. Like, it's not like the most enjoyable company they could imagine in the world is their teammates in the States for a tournament where they don't really give a fuck whether they're winning or not, So I think that ruined them I say ruined. I think that probably took off, a couple of percentages that they needed to win Cologne. So I think when they've been evaluating this first part of the season, first and foremost, as you said, great, won a lot of trophies. Yeah, we didn't win Cologne, massive bummer, but overall, probably would have sold it for the outcome. But I think they will evaluate on that and be like, we have to avoid this scenario at all costs. And one way to avoid that is by planning your calendar a little bit better. You may come out and win the first couple of tournaments, but I wouldn't necessarily, spend too much time catching up now and practicing now. I would select a few tournaments. This is where we want to peak. This is where we want to be good. And this is how we're going to build up to the next major. Because at the end of the day, what Vitality have achieved as a team now, and I think that goes for the whole, staying hungry and making sure Apex, there's only so many times you can take away the food from a dog where the dog will just be like, well, then fuck you, I'm just going to starve myself at this point. So he has to sort of like manage it. When does he apply extra pressure? When does he give an extra gift? When does he give a big meal? When is he sort of like trying to starve the dog to make it a bit more aggressive and a bit more like, I think the major is all that matters now for Vitality. Sure, you want to win another ESL Grand Slam if you can, and sure, you want to win all the trophies that you can, but at the end of the day, letting Cologne slip means that the next major is now even more important. So if I'm Vitality and if I'm not the players, because trust me, they don't think like this. They just want to play every tournament. They want to win every tournament. But if you're the GM or if you're the guy who's responsible for your Counter-Strike team to perform at the right timing, I would look at that calendar and I would try to plan it as meticulously as I can to make sure that you have all the effort, all the resources, and all the energy ready in order to peak for the next major, because that's going to be even more important now that you didn't win Cologne. And I know the public would then be like, okay, if they don't win as many tournaments, maybe they're falling off, maybe they're not as good anymore, but that's a loss or a risk that I'd be willing to take, because we did learn two things in the first part of the season. Vitality is, to me, the greatest team of all time, and a Vitality that is not even practicing can still win tournaments. So if you know that as a team, that's okay. If we go into a tournament with limited practice, or that's a C goal or a D goal or whatever, and we are still competitive to a point where we make the semifinal, or we make the final, or we may even win the trophy, that's fine. It's fine as long as you make sure that's part of a bigger plan to peak for the major. So I'm with you. I think Vitality, to me, like, they're the most likely candidate to win the second major of the year. Still, they're the most likely candidate to be the best team of the second part of the season. But I almost hope that it'll be a little less, dominant than what we've seen so far. And I think being less dominant could be a good thing for Vitality in order to peak for the major. Because I really do firmly believe that period they had where they were in, was it Fort Worth in Atlanta, didn't practice, just wasting a couple of weeks where they could have been home, could have taken the break, and then could have started practice for Cologne a couple of weeks earlier instead of, postponing the break they needed before Cologne. I think that would have been beneficial from Vitality. I think that's something they look at and be like, that probably would have been nice if we did it this way. But then again, I'm totally aware of the fact that then they couldn't prioritize the ESL Grand Slam, which at the end of the day is almost as important as a major. So it's not that I'm saying they made a mistake. It's just that I'm saying that maybe they're willing to be a little worse off at certain tournaments next part of the season to make sure that they're fully ready for the major. Instead of being 99% ready or 97% ready, you want Vitality at 100% so they don't lose the, as you said as well, incredible close game they did play at the major. Losing to Falcons in that quarterfinal, let's be bluntly honest, had one player slipped 5 minutes more, that could have been the difference. It was so close. It was the margins that decided that. So I'm with you, but I think the fashion they'll do it in, and I almost hope the fashion they'll do it in, will be a little less dominant than what we saw in the first part of the season.
Yeah, if people don't know, there's actually a very logical reason, unfortunately, as to why they still attended IM Atlanta, even though they didn't need to, essentially, and they had already won the Grand Slam, which is, as you say, because you have to accept these invites months out, and you can't know the results of tournaments that haven't been played yet. They didn't know they'd win IM Rio, guys. So the problem they had was they needed Atlanta so that there'd be a low-pressure way to complete the Grand Slam if they didn't win Rio. Because if they didn't do Atlanta at that point in time, then basically they would have had to win the major IM Cologne to win the Grand Slam. And the problem with that is, I think they were right to make this speculation. That would make the pressure way too much. That would basically make it the biggest pressure tournament of your entire career, not just like win a major. Remember, these people have already won majors. Actually, one of the good things for them is because they've already won majors, it does take some of the pressure off. Look, you want to win more, but it's not the same as Nico's never won a major. So I think it's one of those examples of where I agree. There's a way you could have done it, especially in hindsight, more perfectly, which would have made it more efficient. But at the same time, if you consider like essentially the logistics and the business considerations, I get why they did it. And then also, I'll just throw this in there as well. One of the reasons why teams are in Counter-Strike is to make money, and you get a lot of prize money. Remember, just for coming even any placing for your club, you get the club share. So I can tell you, Vitality, the org, wants you to go to as many tournaments as they can within reason. I actually think they're being quite fair. This is why, I'll tie this into something before we move on. This is why you saw that interview comment, which you might think, what's that about? Where basically the guy who's the CEO of Vitality said that it's essentially not a priority that the players play in that nations tournament that the EWC people are running at the end of the year, where it's just like a national competition, like a World Cup or a Euros, right? That if you can read between the lines of what he's saying there, basically what he's saying is, because I have the best team in the world, you don't have to play in this other tournament that's not really like a Vitality tournament. You can just choose whether you do or don't. I suspect, by the way, the reason he said that in Counter-Strike Pro is because in League of Legends, Vitality is irrelevant. So I'm pretty sure in League of Legends they will be playing that tournament, and that'll just be another thing you're supposed to do as part of your job in your team, because they probably again want to have good relationship with the Saudis because of EWC, and it's remember the team's partner with the company. So I think that's a giveaway there that actually Vitality does understand that what we're saying, that when you're at this level where you're winning that many trophies, this is why Astralis did it all those years back with the Blastralis, and people forget even before that with the original KRP lineup, there was the one where they missed that Cologne before Krakow because they wanted to focus on Krakow. I don't hate that lot. I know when it doesn't work, it's easy to look back and laugh and go, how silly. But the problem is, there is a logic to it. Like, fans don't seem to realise you will burn out if you just play a million tournaments at 100%. Like, you can't really do that. Even that's why when we say things like, the best example ever is when you have a bracket where you're supposed to be a massive favourite to make the final, but you end up losing in like the semis or the quarter. When we say to a fan, it's like you were looking past the opponent you had to the final. We don't really mean it. Like, there's a sense that you would sit down before every match and you study the match, and you think about the opponent, you respect the opponent, you know what they're strong at. But the point is, part of you unconsciously does know, I'm supposed to win this game though. Like, I'm supposed to be in the final. Like, as soon as that gets to you, like that will affect how you do it. So unfortunately, I do think you have to, I agree with you, you have to find moments to either take a break, or even actually, it's why, fully enough, it's now come true. It's why every now and then it can be good to lose at the right moment. Like, it's actually something that Apex even told me in my interview, the one about last year, where he actually said when they saw how close the Austin major was, part of them thought like, shit, maybe we should have actually lost before this, like let some of the pressure off, and then we would have also not had this idea that we're like an imperfect team that can't lose and got this crazy stress on us. Right, let's pivot, because I'll tell you the last team and we'll just give a couple of thoughts on this.
No, I got one. Okay. You can have your last team as well, but I want you to assess this for me, because I'm not sure what to make out of it. If I say Sensu, Magisk, Electronic, and Simple, is there any world? Is there any way? Is there any? Is there any sort of real world where you think they'll be relevant with the BC? I know they haven't signed a fifth player.
I won't say what it is yet, because I don't know when this will be released. Maybe it'll actually be out by the time you've seen this. So whatever. You go watch Hot Take Point Mate. I actually have a take on that where I do a hot take. Here's what's sad, Pimp. I'll be totally honest at the outset. Part of this is like the karrigan thing. karrigan and Simple are two of the players. In theory, if Device ever locks his head in, I'd pick him too. There's certain players I will ride or die with. As in, I actually just believe they have an ability to like bring their game back to the top level. They have actually a passion to play. That's why with Simple, if you notice, my real question with Simple isn't talented. It's, does he care about the game? Does he, like, if you notice, I often say these things on Twitter, not as a fan. I genuinely wish that Simple thinks this way. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. On 4Play, our movie review series on LFN, we recently just actually did a review, it hasn't come out yet, of Inception, the Christopher Nolan movie, where you go into people's dreams and you can put an idea in. If I could do that to Simple, here's the idea I would incept into his mind, Pimp. I would just incept into his idea. So every time he's awake, he thinks of this idea. The idea would be, if you actually were the greatest of all time, why not beat Ziwu and Donk now? That's the idea I wish I could put in Simple's brain. Because I swear, bro, if we could make that like the thought that kicks all of the... He would become amazing tomorrow, mate. He would grind so hard. You would see all the things you loved about Simple. Now, the obvious concern is, can that have happened? I'm going somewhere with this. You'll see where I'm going. Right? I actually think if I assess Simple's performance in CS2, one of the problems is I don't think he ever has fully committed. I even think if you watch how he plays, Pimp, I often tell people this, as someone who's watched basically every official game of Simple's career, in CS2 with these like scuffed rosters, because remember, he's never been on a team that was actually all, even the FaZe one was pretty scuffed. He was only there for a short amount of time. In all these scuffed rosters, it actually looks like he's a lot more baity than he ever was in CSGO, bro. People forget this. Even though he was like an AWPer, I always used to say he was the most alien AWPer of all time, though, because, for example, he was think about Jame. When Jame does a save, most of the time, even though you can go, oh, bloody Jame, yeah, but if you have an AWP in a 1v3, you're probably not going to win that round. It might mathematically make sense to just keep the AWP and have an AWP next round. I used to say Simple never saw a 1v3, he didn't feel like me. He used to just go for them all, because he had like that crazy mindset, was like, well, I'm going to kill all three people and win the round. Why would I save? Like, to him, that was an alien idea. Like, that's not the Simple you see now, mate. He is way more, I think, opportunistic. Like, he waits back. He definitely baits people a bit more than the T-set, I'll tell you that, mate. The old Simple, I've even seen rounds, mate, when games were going badly in the old NAVIs that were like scuffed rosters, like Edward and Zeus, when they were bad players, where he would sometimes do shit like just run in first, like just run down lower on train with an AWP and just try and fucking shoot someone miles. That's insane. No AWPer would do that. Like, if you put any like traditional AWPer, they're going to go third and let someone go back and someone jump around the corner. So I say all this to say, the reason why I have hope that they can actually be relevant, Pip. Look, the obvious problem is I don't know the fifth player. It's implied to me, based on the clues, it must be Laux based on who's left, which isn't a bad signing. I will say, this is just worth pointing out there. Kassad did point out, by the way, even before Laux left foot, that he actually said, because when Laux went bad at the end of the season, because obviously he coached him in Bleed, he did say apparently Laux has like a reputation that he's sort of ticking time bomb, that like eventually there'll be some drama or some blow up, or he'll just, like, I don't know, get a mood or something. Right, that is a bit scary, I will say, because you don't tell me that, bro, before I airdrop this guy into a team with Electronic, Simple, and are you ready? People are going to not know this one. And Magus, bro. If people don't know, Magus is one of the spies at Cajun B tier of spiciness of day. And I always tell people, the reason I don't want anyone to think Astralis was all kumbaya is I heard in that team, mate, it was like Magus and Glavens on it just arguing half the fucking time. That's how they fixed all the problems and became like Cook, the greatest team of all time. It wasn't through no friction, bro. As far as I can tell, they had a really healthy friction dynamic where people could sort of call each other out and get ahead of shit. So it's all to say the following. The Laux one scares me, but actually I think every other player on that team can work, and here's why. I think the Senzu signing, mate, is mega. I think it's actually unbelievable that a team of the level of BC game, which should be irrelevant, can even get a player like that. Like, as far as we can tell, there's something dodgy going on there. There's a reason why, as far as I can tell, he's not in the big tier. But whatever it is, mate, this is one of those ones, if you want to use the football analogy, this is like getting a Marcus Rashford thing. It's like, right, you know what, if something's gone wrong elsewhere, but fuck it, if I can get this player, I'll give him a go, maybe he becomes good. So I think the Senzu one's a banger. Simple can already put up numbers. Here's my hope, Pimp. I actually referenced this earlier in the episode. I put Simple in the same category as people like Nico, where I do think they actually do think that the legendary players of old, they have like extra respect for them, bro. It's why Nico was willing to waste a whole like 2 years of his career playing with Cold Zero, where it's like, mate, that's not Cold Zero anymore, though. Like, he's good, but like, that's not the guy that was the number one player in the world. I can get why you'd want to go back in time and team up with him, but that's not who you've got in your team now. So I think Simple's a bit like that. So essentially, the reason I bring this up is, I actually do think, by the way, he will actually be respectful of Magus. I don't think he'll do what he did to those Portuguese guys, where, look, I'll never buy the idea he was mega toxic. He looked like he was just mildly rude to them, Pim. He wasn't even saying anything crazy. I've always told people, go find any clip. The worst he's saying is stuff like, why are you peeking, bro? Like, basic, like, fucking the most light-hearted shit ever. Just because he's Simple, that's treated as he said, like, I'd kill you after the game or something mad, like, which he never said anything approaching that. But the difference is, I think he respects people like Mega Smith, who are mega winners and have done it and have been there, and he's battled them over the years. And so I actually, and also lastly, I am one of those people where ever since he did it, that brief period during COVID, I have always wanted to see one day Magus become an IGL. I feel like if you think of like Danish IGLs, it actually isn't more the device like Twistzz, like, hey, I'm a star and I swap. No, it's usually players who've played the more structural roles in teams. And in his case, I believe he's even been a secondary caller. And eventually one day they just decide, right, you know what, I'm at the point in my career I'm ready to commit to it. Because there's the last thing to say. I don't think Magus does this for 3 months, mate, and then retires on the end of his career. I think this is him being an IGL now. I think this is, you're going to see the last couple of years of his career, he will be an in-game leader. and he'll become one of the classic lineage of Danish. So I think it can work. I might be crazy because everyone else thinks this is like a wash team and it's still. And in fact, but here's the other reason I'll bring up Pimp, because I actually get, on a lower scale, Falcons vibes. But if you remember, it took so long to turn the narratives around about Falcons. Remember, bro, even until, like, it went like this, 2024, they all suck, the whole org's a failure, they'll never accomplish anything. 2025, when they got Monty, they're immediately relevant, like, oh, well, they don't win tournaments, though, they haven't won the major, though, and then when they win the major, well, you've only won one major for 20 minutes, like, bro, you're always going to have something against this team. So, BC Game, it's going to be like that. It was supposed to be a joke team and a retirement team. I think this is the team that becomes a real team. With that said, even my crazy hot take is like they become top 10 or something. Like, they're not going to win tournaments. Let's not be silly.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Are you more skeptical?
Yes and no. I don't know. I'll keep it short because I think once we know the fifth player, it almost deserves another round of discussion. So I like the way you put it, but I'll just keep it brief and short now. I think to me the most interesting thing, depending on who the fifth player is as well, Maggie's as an in-game leader, etc. We can talk more about that later. But I agree with your simple point to the extent that if he can get a team where he starts to believe that if I get my shit together, then the other four guys I'm playing with, they're good enough that we can actually be great. That's when you get to see Simple come back. And that's the only way he gets motivated. That's the only way you get to insert that idea you had about him, from that movie where he's like, oh, fuck, if I get my shit together, then we're going to the playoff. We may win a trophy. Like, if you can install that belief in Simple, because the other four players, and Twistzz for that matter as a coach, is good enough to make him realize that, so I'm the one that needs to get my shit together and I need to get back to my GOAT level or close to it, which I very much agree with you. It's the same with KDS. It's the same with Sairu. I have a few players where I'm like, these players are so fundamentally talented that it doesn't matter if they don't touch the game for 2 years. If they come back and they work as hard as they did when they were great, they'll be fantastic at the game again. Now, Kenny S couldn't do it because he just couldn't find the motivation, but I've had many conversations with him. I've spoken to him a lot, and he was one of my best friends back in the day when we both still played. Like, I always told him, like, when you're motivated, you're the best player in the world in Counter-Strike. The problem is you're rarely motivated. Like, you're never really willing to do it, and he realized that, and then maybe he found a way to do it more often than not. But I have the same with Simple. So to me, the most intriguing part about BC Game, depending on who the fifth player is and how well they get off, and how quickly they get the BIS points, so we can actually see them at better tournaments. If the other four players somehow convince Simple that, hey, if I get my shit together, then I can elevate this team. That's when you get to see a team where I'm willing to buy into BC Game being not only just a team that gets to the tournament. I can see them make the playoff at big tournaments if they get their shit together, because there's so much quality within that team. And I know people are like the same with Electronic, that he's washed, he's bad. I've seen stuff from Electronic. I've seen his point of view from some of these tournaments. There's still something in.
He seems fine, mate. Yeah.
He seems fine.
Well, as long as I know he doesn't have to be the star player or the IG. I think he can be just a role player. I think he can be. Exactly. That's why I didn't even mention him. I think he'll just be okay, mate. He seems like he's fine now.
He'll be fine with the potential of being even better, and I agree with you. Like, the greatest signing for this team is Sensu. Like, I don't know how they convinced him to do it.
It's nuts, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, how much money they paid, to make sure that he's like, okay, I'm gonna quote unquote risk wasting my career in BC Game, but fair enough, worth the risk, and if you get paid for it as well, then go for it. So I think there's potential. So I'm inclined to agree with you, but I'd like to have this discussion when we know who the fifth player is.